Welcome to Manatee Open Line, everyone. Our number is 747-1264. Our guest is Gloria Rains, who, of course, is the director of Minnesota 88 and the host of Minnesota 88, which is on every Monday evening from 8 to 8:30. In case you have not had a chance to see that show, that's quite a show. It's, of course, an environmental show, as Gloria is involved in environmental issues. I want to talk to a couple of things in the beginning of the show here tonight. First of all, I get my glasses. You know, Dr. Gary Dolan gave me a prescription about 2 months ago, I guess, and I finally get them filled today. And you'd be amazed how better you can read a newspaper when you actually have these glasses, when you need to have glasses to read a newspaper. I actually started to enjoy reading it. Of course, I didn't enjoy reading this particular newspaper, but it's nice to be able to read. First of all, one thing I'm concerned about, and I'm sure Gloria is too, is swift mud. On the front page of the Herald this morning, there was an article that says, Water District backs budget, $119.1 million proposal. This is a swift mud proposal. Now, folks, what we have here is we have an authority that absolutely no one has any control over. It's just running amok. It's raising money, it's doing whatever it feels like doing, and no one can say you can't do it. No one has any input about it because we don't have any input on swift mud, with the exception of the new representative, who is also the head of Tropicana, I think, isn't he?
The environmental officer for Tropicana.
Yeah, environmental officer for Tropicana. These people are raising $119.1 million. $31.2 million more than last year. $31.2 million more to run swift mud than last year. And you have no input about it, and whether you like it or not, that's exactly what's going to happen, folks. Whether you like it or not, they're going to get your tax money for $31.9 million, and that's in 16 different counties. But what I found interesting was in this article, let me see if I can find this, they are spending $7.5 million on construction of a 3-story, 52,000 square foot office building in Brooksville. What do I care if they got a 52,000 square foot office building in Brooksville? They don't like it because they're working out of trailers. I don't care if they work out of tents. What difference does it make? We're the ones that have to pay for this. And they think that that's pretty neat because they're going to raise $7.5 million to build themselves some kind of big mausoleum up in Brooksville so a bunch of little people, pencil pushers, can sit down and say, well, let's see what we can do to Manatee County this week. Or maybe we're going to take a little water from this, or maybe we're going to shut this down, and no one has anything to say about it. And then if you continue on, it says, one of the fellows in here said that we have reduced the operating budget. If they've reduced the operating budget by raising $31.9 million, that's beyond my belief. I can't imagine how anybody can do that. Also, there was a quote in here by saying that they didn't think that was too bad. They didn't think that increase was too bad. Can you imagine? Now, Pat Glass just left this station. Can you imagine that if the county commissioners came out to you this year and said, we're going to raise our budget by $31.9 million, do you think that we'd just sit back and say, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's just fine. That's hunky-dory. Go ahead and raise it. Of course we wouldn't. We have no representation on here. We have a taxing authority. You talk about taxation without representation. This is it in a nutshell. Swift mud. I can remember a few years ago, Swift Mud up in Brooksville, they had a nice little building in there. There was a few people that were truly environmentalists, and they were engineers, and they were people that were really interested in the environment. Now they're obviously overstaffed. They want to spend $7.5 million to build themselves a mausoleum up in Brooksville. Of all places, Brooksville, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, sort of like our county and how its government is growing too, I might add.
Oh yes, it's growing, and it's growing at a fast rate, but at least we have some kind of input about that. We can go to budget hearings. We can say we don't want you to do that. We have elected representatives that are responsible to us as voters, and they will in fact listen to our input as voters, and because they are elected, they will listen to what you have to say and will back off. We've seen that happen with the Pirates. We've seen it happen with a lot of other things. They'll back down and say, okay, this is a bad idea. Let's forget it and go on to the next step.
Sometimes they do, yes.
Yeah. But when you're looking at with this authority, you have absolutely no input. You will not stop them from raising nearly $32 million of our money. Now, what's going to happen next year? Maybe they want to build another building for maybe $50 million. Maybe they don't like the size of that building, and maybe they'll build another one. Another thing that was in the paper today was the monitoring. This is interesting. Royston phosphates. If you recall, back in November of was it August of '89, they had 23,000 gallons of sulfuric acid leaked from a storage tank at the plant at Royster, and thank God the wind was right, and you know the rains didn't come, and we didn't get a few people killed out of this thing. But then, of course, they went out and they want to expand their plant, and the county, you know, was against it, the county commissioners, and then they wound up getting involved in a lawsuit with one of their own departments, and they had to back down from this, and they had to give in to these people. Now, these people, this is almost funny. We have just dropped our pollution control division here in Manatee County, and these folks have just bought a monitoring device, monitors sulfur dioxide emissions. But who's going to run it? there's nobody left to run this. I mean, they've gone out and spent $12,000 for a piece of equipment that nobody's going to run because we don't know what we're going to do with this.
Not only that, we have a very fine air pollution engineer now, and if you note in there, he says we need an air-conditioned trailer, which we've needed for ages and haven't gotten. But you're right, and we need to monitor Royster. It needs to be there, and it can't be because we don't have the right equipment.
Right.
And nobody to look at it.
And now that we do have the equipment that they bought, which I find ironic, they're
Yes.
buying a piece of equipment. It's almost like a payoff. Instead of paying the fine, we're going to give you this piece of equipment.
absolutely was.
And it's a big payoff, and of course it's a joke. You know, the whole thing's a joke. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not the commissioner's fault because they tried desperately to try to get this thing resolved, but the courts, you know, stepped in and said you can't do it, and now we're going to have, well, God knows what we're going to have out there if anything ever happens again with another incident like happened in August of '89. Gloria, of course, one of the reasons you're here tonight is that there's been a lot of concern about the Pollution Control Department here in Manatee County. Under the direction of HRS, or was under the direction of HRS, and as you know, in fact, maybe you can explain this a little bit better than I can because I get confused about it myself. HRS is a state agency.
Right.
But at the same time, the county, tell us how the structure of it was.
Well, I think there are 2 counties perhaps left in Florida where HRS does partial funding. The rest of the counties fund their own. HRS didn't like to fund our program. They didn't think it was appropriate, and I agree with them. And so last year they proposed to drop the funding. Our county was aghast, and they aren't willing to pay what it takes to run it. So right now they're trying to give the Tampa office of the Department of Environmental Regulation the job of running all the programs that haven't been delegated by the agency to Manatee County. Essentially, that's all of them. There are 2 or 3 exceptions. So our county is going to be, when DER people can get down here occasionally, is going to be monitored by DER. And maybe you want to get into that letter, and I can explain what Karen Collins, sort of throw a different light on what Karen Collins and Mrs. Glass just said.
Right. One question I have for you is, do you think, is that based on the fact that HRS may not be filled with competent people? I mean, we've seen that we had a problem with the city, supposedly the water crisis, and we think that that was not true. The Pollution Control Department is another problem that we've had. Is this, you think, is something that everybody's trying to sweep under the rug while it's an election year and not want to get involved in really what's happening here in Manatee County?
This was something, getting rid of the Pollution Control Department and duplicative services that I've heard all week was something that Gus Ellis proposed 2 years ago. He doesn't understand environmental concerns, and he just didn't see paying for that program. And what has happened within pollution control has given the county the excuse that they needed to sort of abandon the program. We'll get into that a little bit more after you get into Karen's letter.
Okay. Also, we should point out that I talked to Pat Glass prior to this show, and she said that what they're hoping to do, and of course I can understand having been an elected official, there's, you know, obviously you're on one side, they're on one side, and somewhere in the middle I'd like to be to try to gather everybody together to make resolutions to problems. It is a very difficult decision to make as an elected official also, and she's hoping, or says the board is hoping to bring together all of these things and make one environmental department.
And it won't work.
Okay.
And if you want me to get specific, or do you want to read Karen's letter first?
Well, let me take a phone call and then I'll read Karen's letter.
Fine.
Welcome to Manatee Open Line.
Yeah, thanks for accepting my phone call. I want
Yes,
to
sir.
make a comment here, and I think you might agree with me, Dan.
Okay.
My wife's a professional in the medical field, and we run across a case of child abuse. And this lady didn't really believe when my wife was reporting this to this lady that worked at the HRS that, you know, this was going on, and she wanted to know my wife's name. So my wife gave this lady, the lady that's doing the investigation, her name, and saying, look, I am such and such, you know, and this is what I do in the medical field. So that this lady would have a little bit of trust in my wife's judgment and her professional view of this situation, or her professional experience. And this lady that did the investigation confronted the family that was being reported and asked this reported family, do they know such and such, well, my wife's name, and brought my wife's name right back into the picture of the reported family. Now, and I went over and I jumped all up and down these people and said, what kind of qualifications do you have to do this type of job? And I think we need to evaluate the people that we already have in the positions that are there now. And if they're not qualified, get them out, because they're doing more harm than good. There's no sense of paying them to do harm. Get them out.
Well, you bring up a good point.
I think certainly we didn't really get into my opinion of HRS, but I don't know of anything in HRS that works. But this is our pollution control department personnel, our professionals, and they're separate and distinct from HRS. They've been supervised after a fashion by them, but they have scientific and engineering backgrounds, and if left alone, they do a good job since they don't have the same pollution control director anymore.
Yeah, HRS itself is a problem. Of course, we know where it stems from. It all starts at the top with Governor Babby.
And his dear appointees.
And for as long as he might be governor, which is probably only a couple more months, and then we'll be going to his restaurant up in Tampa if you want to take the chance to go up there and eat. Let me read this letter from Karen Collins, who's Environmental Service Coordinator of Manatee County. This is in response to the Friday editorial in the Herald. It says, Editor, this is a written response to your Friday editorial headed Dismantling Pollution Control. Your editorial reflects a number of misconceptions regarding the County Commission's intention to restructure its approach to pollution control issues. The Manatee County Commission is dedicated to environmental protection and has shown this commitment in the County Comprehensive Plan, which contains environmental protection requirements more stringent than federal or state standards in most cases. The Board is working to construct, from existing programs and others that will be created, a model pollution control program. Do you want to respond as I go along, or you want to wait?
Get into the next paragraph where she talks about what they're really proposing here.
Okay. Continues, says, you implied that there will be a dangerous gap in pollution control activities between now and fiscal year 92, during which time the Board will be doing little more than studying, again, pollution control's future. This is not the case. Pollution control activities will continue as usual until October 1st, 1990.
Yeah, I would like to step in there. I'm sure that some members of the Commission are doing this because they think it's a good thing to do, and I'm sure Gus Ellis is doing it because he thinks it will save money, and some of the commissioners think that's a good thing to do. But what will happen is that they're proposing that any of the, as I say, the programs that have not been delegated to our county pollution control unit will be performed by the Department of Environmental Regulation in Tampa. And those include the air pollution program in the main, solid waste program, effluent monitoring, that's what goes into your rivers and your bays. They'll be monitoring, in theory, the water off the beaches to let you know when it's safe, like our pollution control unit does. The dredge and fill, which means our wetlands will have no protection, and the development and construction permitting as some of the programs that will return to Tampa. The people in DER have said, two of them at least, that we can't do that. They don't have enough staff or ability to come down here. In the case of an emergency like Royster, they wouldn't be here. In the case of a spill in the river from Tropicana, they wouldn't be here. In the case of high pollution conditions in the bays or where we swim in the Gulf, that often happens after a rain, they won't be here. In the case of excess SO2 or emissions from Royster, they won't be here. It goes on and on. And I don't care if the county wants to restructure the pollution control department. There's no question that it needs it. But what they need to do while they're debating how to do this is not throw most of the program up to Tampa, but get a pollution control director or appoint someone to take over for a year and keep the same people there, let them do their job. Instead, in a very bureaucratic, sure to please the public response, Mrs. Glass has proposed that we set up a task force to decide what kind of pollution control department we want. Well, I've dealt with this subject for 20 years, as have a lot of other people that are involved in this, and I think the way to decide what kind of a pollution control department we want is to bring in the people from the very best department in the state of Florida or wherever else we can find them, and let them, with their expertise, decide what would be the most efficient and best serve the public's interest department. It's not to put it in a bureaucratic maze and mix it in with planning and code enforcement under our, whatever Karen Collins' name is, under her position. Again, the scientific and the technical aspects of it will be lost in the bureaucratic maze.
Well, also during the course of from October 1st on to this task force, what are we looking at? Maybe a year before someone decides where it should go. And in the meantime, as you pointed out, DER and Tampa is so totally detached from Manatee County, it would be impossible for them physically to respond to some of these issues, as you pointed out. Spills from Royster, spills possibly from toxic chemicals from one of our larger industrial complexes, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So there would be a problem. This continues on. It says, control activities will continue until October 1st. It says, then the county will contract with the county public health unit or amend their existing contract for performance of essential pollution control activities. This approach will ensure cost effectiveness and accountability. Now, of course, the county public health unit is probably the last place in the world that you want to see a pollution control division in. We know that Dr. Brannick was a very lovely lady, and I love her a lot, and she's a great lady, but she's got her hands full as a clinician trying to find out what's happening with the children in the schools and all the diseases and so forth that are going around in the county. And certainly I don't know whether or not she is capable or wants to get involved in something
She
like
said, quite frankly, that she didn't want to get involved in the pollution control angle, and I can see why with all the upset conditions. But nevertheless, we need an administrator in that job, that somebody can administrate the health department, and perhaps she'd be better used to use her medical experience hands-on.
Right, and I'm sure she feels the same way. I don't think that we're talking out of turn for her.
Right.
It says during fiscal year 91, the Department of Environmental Regulation, which we call DER, will be responsible only for programs that cannot be carried out without specific delegation from the agency.
And those are all the ones I read to you.
Right, all the ones that you said. While DER is conducting these activities in the county, we will monitor their responsiveness and effectiveness while working towards future delegation of these programs. Well, that's going to be pretty difficult because Karen's in charge of environmental services and they have a lot more to do besides that. That encompasses quite a bit of work right now without trying to monitor what DER is doing. And even if you did monitor what DER is doing, as a county, you don't have any control over what the state's doing anyway.
Well, since DER won't be able to do much, there's not going to be much to monitor. So I don't know how you can judge their effectiveness. As I say, this may have been started with the best of intention. No, I don't believe it was. It was initiated by Mr. Ellis to save money and was brought up 2 years ago to me. But I think that giving them credit for wanting to do the right thing, go ahead and keep what you've got now, let it function. But then go ahead and look at what else we can set up within that year's time.
Establish a task force and work on it.
Well, I don't know why we want to establish a busy task force that will be led by somebody in the county to the resolution that they want. I think it would be better to bring in people who have well-running, effective pollution control units.
Yeah, so other agencies, other cities or
Let them
counties?
have a task force of capable people.
It continues on to say, to state that the proposal would save the county some $350,000 next fiscal year is misleading. This is not money that will be saved for use on non-pollution control activities. This money has been specifically allocated in this year's budget and will be used only for pollution control, environmental protection activities, where, what is decided where the money will be best spent.
Well, the last time I heard, they were just going to put it aside. First, they weren't going to spend it, then they were going to put it aside. This changes and may change more if there's sufficient pressure brought to bear.
Okay. Continues on to say, in the past, the county made lump sum allocations to pollution control and had no control over and little information on the services being provided with those funds. The Commission is understandably loath to allocate dollars to the Public Health Unit's Pollution Control Division based on last year's budget plus some arbitrary increase. What is happening now is actually zero-based budgeting. The board wants an in-depth understanding of the pollution control activities that must be carried out in order to fully protect the public health, safety, and welfare, as well as implement the county's comprehensive plan and land development code. It continues on, you are correct in stating that a local pollution department is geared to concerns that are unique to Manatee County. That is, in fact, the Commission's ultimate goal. Creation of a very strong, cost-effective, local pollution control capability backed by legal authority to inspect, monitor, collect fees, and enforce through civil and criminal penalties. We do not have this capability now, nor have we in the past. I am confident that with a lot of hard work and the spirit of cooperation, the County Commission, municipalities, state agencies, and the citizens of Manatee County will make this goal a reality. Written by Karen M. Collins, Environmental Service Coordinator, Manatee County. By the way, it was a well-written letter, and I'm sure she meant every word that she said. It isn't something that she's trying to dupe the public with. I mean, I'm sure that she absolutely believes what's going on here. But
I think that's possible. Also, the county did have reports of what went on in pollution control, and I think the administrator could have done a better job of finding out if he didn't know. After all, at least 3 of those commissioners voted for the director they got rid of over our objections at the time that he was appointed. So they bear some responsibility for that. He's no longer in that position. Dr. Brannick did do that, and the people who've remained there have brought their performance up and are trying very hard to function. Whether the county has the ability legally to find someone or not, they have gone out. They do go out when you call them. When people are breaking the law, and their presence there and their writing violations stops this in most cases. It's been much more effective in the last few months.
Well, the pollution control director was released, wasn't it, because of decertification from DER? Is that what caused it?
No, the program in due deference to the fellow just fell apart around his feet. When you can't please everyone, and that brings up another problem with that, the concept of bringing that under the county. With the utility system as strong as it is and being the biggest polluter in the county, I think that we will have conflicts and it will be difficult to keep those people in line.
So it's very difficult to monitor yourself, essentially.
Right.
It's difficult to say, well, we're doing something wrong, and obviously there's going to be pressure brought on the people who would be in control of that.
Yeah.
What do you see for the future of this? I mean, where's this going?
Well, I think just the way the county says, we will essentially have no protection for a year unless they change their minds and say, at least we can keep the people that we have, which they intend to do anyway. Let them do the jobs they're doing, and in the meanwhile, we'll take a look at what really should be in place. But we have a year to do it, but they can go on and function as they have really quite efficiently since the director has been removed. Mm-hmm. So you can't please everyone, and I think of a perfect example of the utility system. For quite a long time, gave their effluent to Manatee Fruit Company to spray on their fields from their wastewater treatment, and this was running off in great copious amounts into the bay off Tidy Island. And the Pollution Control Department did keep, when they had the old director, did keep speaking a little bit sternly to Mr. Wilford. Nothing was done until we flew over, and the person and took pictures of this, and the person in pollution control was with us and was able to say, hey, Minnesota 88 has pictures of what's happening. Are you going to do something? Well, yeah. So it's not easy to get them to respond to problems, and I don't know what will happen when you get your politicians. I know what's happened in the past when politicians have called the director and told them to go easy on some of the larger companies in our county.
What do we do as citizens? How do we get involved with this?
Well, I think as citizens, as a citizen, I have already let the commissioners know that I think that they should continue let the department operate the way it is for this year period they're talking about, and in the meanwhile, at the end of the year, have something else online ready to go. When I spoke to the commission last week, I guess at the same time somebody was saying a year. I think Mr. Seifert, or whatever his name is, was saying 2 years, and probably that's what you're looking at.
So actually, you got 2 years without any
He wasn't saying that
control.
out loud. He was
right.
saying it where.
But you're essentially looking at 2 years without any control, or at least a year without any control.
Certainly, I would think so.
And so we as citizens should be calling the commissioners ourselves and saying, let's think about this. Is not cast in stone, by the way. I would expect this is not a final decision that has been made. They're only asking at this point for general discussion, and there has not been a solid vote.
Well, unless there's a lot of pressure, I think that it will happen. A lot of pressure from the public.
Well, you hear it. There's a pressure from the public. Now, we've had a lot of phone calls here at Manatee 43 about this situation. If you're out there watching tonight and you're concerned about it, then now's the time to call your county commissioners and give the input that you've heard tonight and say that let's just cool this off a little bit. As the kids say, let's chill out here for a little while and let's see if we can at least maintain what we have until we find a decent way to replace that system. But by giving up control or by thinking the DER is going to take over, we're just kidding ourselves. I mean, that's like asking HRS to come in and take over everything that's in this county.
I will say there's some good people up at DER, and they're very concerned because they know they can't do their job as it is, much less supposedly managing Manatee County's problems.
Right, at the same time.
Right.
And we certainly don't want to get involved in something where we can't trust an emergency response, especially when something like the Royster spill. That was only, we have short-term memories here. That was only a year ago. That was August of '89. That's a year ago, last month. And if you can recall how much panic was generated by that, if you were sitting at home watching the television saying, my God, it's 11:30 at night and they're afraid it's going to rain. If it rains, they want to evacuate thousands of people because somebody could die out there. And at least we did have a response at that point.
And looking at Royster again, since there is no way to measure sulfur dioxide out there now, you may have large emissions and people out there may cough and hack as they have before and have difficulty breathing. By the time somebody from DER came down to measure that, it would be a long gone situation. Right. So that's another example.
Let's take a phone call. Welcome to Manatee Open Line.
Good evening.
Hello.
I have a question for Gloria Rains.
Okay.
I'd like to know, I've heard her, been sitting here listening to her commending the Pollution Control Department and so forth, and I would just like to know what her opinion is on the recent handling of this water crisis in Bradenton. It seems to me like it was just a big fiasco, the way the whole thing was handled, very questionable as to the results and the way the tests and things were done, and also the qualifications of some of the people who are there, such as Mr. Chuck Wolford. It's my understanding he has a medical background, and yet he's in pollution control, and also just the procedure of the whole thing, the way, the notification of it and everything. And I will hang up so I can hear her response, but I would just like to know what she feels about the whole thing.
Okay,
great.
then I have to qualify. What I said about pollution control will exclude Mr. Wolford from that, who is Ms. Dr. Brannick's assistant, who is with HRS. When I was talking of the improvement in pollution control, I was in particular referring to an extremely competent engineer who's in charge of air quality, Robert Baum, and Tom Larkin, who has picked up the ball for a lot of the testing of our rivers and bays and has done a good job on that. As far as the laboratory end of it, we do need a laboratory. I understand what you're saying about the water crises and the fact that we were not properly notified, but unfortunately you have to attribute that to Mr. Walford or whatever, Wofford and Dr. Brannick and not wanting to create any waves. That was an HRS faux pas, not this little group of good technicians and able people that they have in the section of the Pollution Control Department.
Yeah, those basically the little upper management problems that we had with HRS at that point. And Dr. Brannick, I can't even accuse her, blame her. She was out of town. She was away for 2 weeks and came back in and found this dumped in her lap.
I would think somebody would have called her and she might have come home.
True. We're going to take a break and we'll be back in just a minute with Gloria Rains. Back to Manatee Open Line. Our guest, of course, is Gloria Rains, head of Manasota 88, and also a host of Manasota 88 on Monday evenings here on Channel 43. I know we have a couple of phone calls holding. Well, I wanted to clarify one thing. We're talking about Mr. Wofford, or is he Dr. Wofford? I think this
Mr.
Mr. Wofford, as opposed to Mr. Wolford. I mean, there's two different people here, and we don't want to accuse somebody of being something that they're not. Mr. Wofford, by the way, I think was the one, the HRS Mr. Wofford is the one I think that made that incredible statement about that all the symptoms of the people who were in the hospital was caused by city water. And they said, well, can you prove that? No, that's just my opinion. And of course the newspaper had to print that, and you know, his opinion to me is worth nothing anyway after the lack of credibility based on what they did with these tests in the city. First time in the history of the state of Florida we shut down a city water system and no one's ever been able to duplicate these test results again. Welcome to Manatee Open Line.
Hello.
Hello.
May I speak with Mrs. Rains?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Rains, I was shocked when the county came out with their idea on pollution control when we need it most, and the developers need watching so carefully because they destroy all the trees, the wetlands, unless someone's there to watch them. They're supposed to replace trees as they bulldoze over, and they put a little stick of a tree in place instead of those beautiful trees. Would you comment on it, please?
Well, I think with the county's proposal for a year minimum, there's going to be open season on wetlands by the developers. There's not going to be any oversight. DER can't monitor. All they do is issue permits. They have 2 people to monitor or 3 people to monitor wetland mitigation in 16 counties. So you'll have no one essentially looking after your wetlands or your trees. You have the response of the county that's pushing, the people in the county that are pushing this, is say, well, you have code enforcement. Nobody in code enforcement has the proper background to judge the success or whether wetland mitigation is progressing well. Karen Collins' response to this is, well, we'll hire somebody that does and put them there. Why not keep them where they are in one unit under pollution control, no matter how it's set up? But no, we won't have any protection for a year, contrary to what's been said by the county.
Well, what do you think? Is this, are they not liking the people that are in this department, or what's the problem?
Well, I think a lot of it is lack of knowledge on their part, though I find that very hard to forgive. And second, I think there's a real desire to get the pollution control under one unit along with planning or certain aspects of planning. And the county can pretty well control the way things go. And you have to realize that when you get in to the checking of wetlands for planning and for growth, that you have a conflict right there as opposed to checking wetlands to see that they're properly preserved, that they aren't damaged. So it's just a poor idea, and I think it was well intended by many people, not so well intended by some, but they shouldn't be
Even now with county overseers, I know in your show a couple of weeks ago you had a fellow that, what's John's last name, John? The fellow we went out in the boat with, and
John Keck.
yeah, John Keck, and he was talking about the loss of mangoes out there on some of the islands that you and I and he had been out to see,
Right.
and they're just disappearing for some reason. We know that someone's taking them out of there, but no one can prove that. So just imagine that happening without any local control. It's happening now with local control. Without that, God knows what will happen. To disseminate, the day that we were out there, which is almost 2 years ago
Right.
now, there were literally thousands and thousands of pelicans breeding on the islands, and now he said that there were 3 or 4 birds left
Yeah,
out
they're
there
gone.
on those islands, and the birds are gone. Where do they go? Has anyone discovered where they've gone?
Not really. At first, the Audubon Society man thought that the raccoons had caused it. I question that, but we'll see whether they come back or not.
Well, how would they say the raccoons caused it? From eating
Because
eggs?
pelicans hate raccoons because they harass the raccoons harass the pelicans, steal their eggs and so on, and quite often they'll move on. But this wouldn't explain the wide sale desertion of bird key. And I think, again, you have to look at our county pollution control and how woefully underfunded it was and is. We have one mangrove specialist in this county, and he does try to get around and do his job, and particularly if people will not apply political pressure when he wants to turn in a developer.
There are other concerns that we all have, and we just got finished doing a documentary for Minnesota 88 on recycling, and we're going to show that, by the way. A lot of people called today because they missed that. Last night we're going to show that tonight. You're also showing it Monday on your show, because I think it's a very important documentary about recycling. We're now in the process, in the next week or so, to start on another documentary for Minnesota 88 for toxic waste storage, as opposed to disposal. I don't think we're going to get involved in disposal as much as we are the storage. But that, to me, is a very dangerous situation that is occurring here, and will probably get even worse than it is right now. How do you feel right now about toxic waste storage, especially?
Well, I think we have to look at where a lot of our toxics are emitted into the air and are stored, and to see what's close to them and what we could do in the event of an emergency. What would our response to our hazmat, very fine hazmat, that's one thing that works in this county, team, how would they be able to evacuate people, or would they? And in the case, say, of Tropicana, where you have 2 or 3 schools close by, 2 or 3 nursing homes, the health department, if there were a significant ammonia or some other type of problem there, I don't think the evacuation capability is there. So I think we'll be looking at where these places are located, how much they've got stored, and that sort of thing. And I want to tell you, you did a great job on that recycling.
Thank you, my darling. You know that. A question was brought up to me the other day. Why do they need these toxics to produce orange juice, for example? I mean, don't you just squeeze orange juice, stick it in a carton, and that's it? You know, do you have any idea?
A lot of cartons. The way Tropicana does it. But no, I think they need a lot of that stuff in refrigeration, and we really need to have somebody from their company. Maybe Mr. Hartman would come on and give us a very brief idea of what they keep there and why they keep it, because Minnesota 88's been pushing for, and so have other environmental organizations throughout the country, for replacement of a lot of these toxics with other substances. And some of your major chemical companies, major offenders, have been leading the way on this, and they found they've saved money.
Where's the disposal now? If for an example, a large company has disposable toxic waste, what do they do with it?
I think they have to send it to Alabama, or what we're working for is that they treat it and before they dispose of it in someplace else, or that they recycle it. We have a hazardous waste recycling thing set up. What's waste to someone might be a good product to another company. So there's a lot we can do. Reduce the use of the stuff and then recycle it. And if we can, the less stuff that's left, treat it where it's generated and neutralize it.
When you say it goes to Alabama, how does it go to Alabama? Do they have a mountain that they stick it under, or?
Well, you have a big landfill that's never supposed to leak, that's leaking like a sieve, and of course it's located in a very poor area where most of these things are always located, and the people there have suffered great economic loss. They were poor enough to begin with. You couldn't give their property away now. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing our county hasn't followed through on, and that's a proposed hazardous waste plant in Polk County. And when the weather people at Ruskin checked it, the meteorological data there showed that the plume from this plant would come right over our reservoir, and the fallout of lead, mercury, and some of your other constituents don't bode well for our future if that plant is permitted to go in.
Again, we did this documentary on recycling, which we'll be showing a little bit later. as far as recycling goes, I know Sarasota County, I saw a news report, I think yesterday, that Sarasota County just bought 20 or 30 new trucks that are designed strictly for recycling. What's Manatee County doing for recycling right now?
I don't know what percentage they're up to now, because as I recall in our program, the fellow said, DeFonso, that they were recycling 45%. I think they're recycling something like 3%. He may have been referring to something else, because I haven't figured that out yet. But the state requires them to recycle up to 30%, and they can do far better than that in about 4 years, I think.
Well, you're looking for 80%. Minnesota 88,
Yeah.
but like 80% recycling.
I think that that's feasible, and it was done by Dr. Barry Commoner and his people in New York, so it can be done on Long Island.
Other concerns that we have as an environmentalist, again, you know, since you're the expert on the environment, I think this is something that I'm concerned about. Alternate forms of energy. We're looking right now at a crisis in the Mideast. You know, you asked me a little bit earlier, is my son still in the Marine Corps? And I said, thank God, no. As far as he's concerned, he wishes he was, because he'd love to be there along with any other Marines that get out of the Marine Corps. But, you know, our whole economy right now is based on oil. We don't have much of a chance to get away from that. We look at just came back from this long trip in Georgia, and no matter what time of day you're on the interstate, there are literally hundreds of trucks that are on that interstate. Take away the oil, take away the gasoline, take away that, and you've taken away your food supplies, you've taken away your furnishings, you've taken away literally everything you can possibly imagine to live on. What are we doing for alternate source of energy? I recall 35 years ago, I recall my cousin had a battery-operated, a solar-powered operated radio 35 years ago, and yet we have not seen anything done with solar energy.
Well, there's been very little. In fact, the people who made the greatest advances in solar cells in our country in the last few years had to sell them to the Japanese, who are now marketing them. They're getting almost competitive with fossil fuel-fired electricity. But in any case, over 10 years ago, we embarked on a renewable energy program, and I think President Reagan cut it way back. President Bush has cut it some more, and now here we are again, faced with this same situation, and I hope people won't let it happen again. We have to get into renewable forms of energy. I noticed that California, in Los Angeles, I think one of the companies has just agreed to purchase or to manufacture and sell 1,000 battery or solar-powered cars. And this will reduce the air pollution load. And somebody at Florida Power today was talking, not Florida Power, like Florida Power, about their interest in doing something similar in the Tampa region. So we just have to move ahead. And I do think that we all know we only get 5 to 6% of our oil from the Mideast in that section.
Right.
And we're protecting other people's oil.
And I see also General Motors is coming out with an electric car in 1992 that goes from 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, has a range of 300 miles, you know, is a full-size automobile. So that to me is nice. We think that technology at least is going someplace. If there can be a lessening of the burden of oil, and we start to understand that, yes, we have to realize that our economy is based on oil, we have to gradually eliminate it. We can't just do it overnight. But I certainly hope that that continues on, and I hope that, that there's more research going on, too.
Well, I think that if there's a decent budget provided, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it's been practically nothing. I think we'll move right along, because the means are there. They just haven't been adequately funded to make them price competitive. There's been a lot of resistance. It's like you talk about our highways. Let's remember who encouraged us to get rid of our trolleys in our trains, and it was the auto industry. Right. And the oil industry really does like us to be wholly dependent upon them. So we have to fight some of those basic problems and move ahead. And
a lot of people were concerned last night with the president's speech because he did not make mention of the fact that, that we're there to resolve an oil problem. He's more or less establishing us to understand a mindset that we're going to be there for a long time to try to protect these oil reserves. But he also mentioned last night that we must start looking again at domestic production of oil, which kind of scares the hell out of me. We start thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to start opening up oil wells in Texas. Oklahoma's going to open up again. We're going to start talking about offshore oil drilling in Florida, off the coast of California. In fact, there was a letter to the editor a couple of days ago from a fellow who wrote probably about people like you.
Full speed ahead,
right. Because of you, because of owls that live in trees and so forth, we're not getting that. But That's kind of frightening, especially when the state of Florida and the people in the state of Florida have been so adamant about offshore oil drilling. We might get into a situation that we don't have any choice, that the government might come down and say, forget what I said, we're going to go in and we're going to start drilling offshore.
Well, if you recall, when Representative Goss was our guest, he mentioned that the pressure was already being put on about us to build some nuclear plants and let's go drill for that oil.
Yeah.
This gave a perfect excuse.
Yeah, it's frightening. I hate to think of it. Welcome to Manatee Open Line.
Hey, Dan. Hi, Gloria. Gloria, this is Gus DeFonso. How you doing?
Fine.
Gloria, I'm watching the show, and I just wanted to touch base on what I heard. Here in Manatee County, currently, Gloria, as you know, this has been a gathering information year, so to speak, because a lot of that data wasn't available to Manatee County, with recycling being new per the state mandate. And currently here in Manatee County, what the county's doing with the municipalities and with all the civic organizations, nonprofit organizations, we're probably somewhere in the neighborhood between 10 and 13% for this first year reporting.
Good.
To reach the 30% goal by 1994. The 45% that I was speaking about when you were nice enough to put us on your show, me and Dan, was that we did a waste composition study as part of this database information gathering, and the minimum amount we felt we could recycle was 45% that we found what was coming into our landfill. So I just wanted to clarify that and say hello.
Gus, let me ask you a question while you're on the phone, Gus.
Sure.
Are we implementing a program like Sarasota County? I know that they just purchased a lot of trucks to get into a real viable recycling program. Are we looking at the same type of thing in Manatee County?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, they're in a little different situation than we are. And I hope Gloria would agree. We're pretty proud, I guess, of our landfill, as proud as you can be as a landfill.
Yeah, you're
the
doing a
job
good
that
job.
Dan has done out there. And what we have out there, Dan, is a lot of space and a lot of life. We don't have the emergency to move as fast as Sarasota County, so we have the luxury, if you want to call it that, to look at some different options. We're getting ready come October to expand our program. Right now we service about 3,000 households on a pilot curbside program.
Right.
We plan to expand that to about 6,000 households, as well as utilize about 8 collection centers throughout the county, which will begin in October.
Great.
But we told the Board of County Commissioners that in early 1991, probably I would say February, that we will be presenting to them a full-scale plan for Manatee County. So I would see sometime in 91 you'll see a full-scale program.
And I just would add another note. It's fascinated me that Waste Management, with a series of violations as long as your arm around this country, seems to have a lock on all these programs in the various counties. And I would hope our county would look elsewhere and listen to other people and their proposals, rather than just being locked into this one company.
Yeah, Gloria, if I may, we're all working off a state legislation. It's called Senate Bill 1192, which requires all the counties to reduce their garbage by 30% by 1994. And in that mandate, it lays it out. But I just wanted to mention that within that mandate, it calls, if a county has franchise waste haulers, they would have to, in good faith, negotiate with them, to reach some type of decent proposal between the two parties. And if they cannot do that within 60 days, then they have the right to go elsewhere. So I think that's why you see Waste Management involved a lot in different counties, because they already are franchise waste haulers in so many areas.
That's good. Gus, we appreciate your phone call. Let us know as your program progresses. We'd like to come out with some cameras sometime and follow you around and see what we can do to help.
We would surely appreciate that, Dan.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you much.
Bye-bye. And of course, Gus is a very nice fellow. He was on your show, and he was nice to us. We went out to the landfill. You and I went out there. We had a lovely time out there, didn't we?
Delightful pirouetting among all the buzzards.
Yes, we saw all the buzzards and all the birds out there.
But they do run a clean landfill, as clean as you can. And I think Gus and Dan would also probably like to have some oversight by pollution control to reaffirm that their operation is working well, and that's not going to be in existence anymore either under this county plan for a full year. There'll be no monitoring of the solid waste issue.
And I think another thing that people should realize too is when you talk to people like Gloria Rains or you listen to shows like this, when we criticize or we discuss, we're not criticizing people themselves. We're talking about programs. We're talking about academic discussions here. We're not talking, because believe me, folks, there are some great people that work for Manatee County. There's thousands of wonderful people that work for Manatee County. that are truly concerned about it. Obviously, this is their home as well as ours, and they're concerned about what goes on. And there's some very fine managers and people who work in all these various departments. So understand that we don't criticize you folks that are working for the county. We criticize sometimes programs, and we criticize academically and philosophically some of the programs that are going on. But agree to disagree. We'll fight to the death. I suppose that we continue to disagree if we have to.
Well, I think a good example of this was when I spoke to the people, like I said, Mr. Baum, a fine air pollution engineer, and Tom, that have tried so hard to do a good job, that I told them I don't know why they're still here, but I'm very grateful that they are.
Right.
And that goes for people in the DER office in Tampa and the few that have managed to stay on in Tallahassee in spite of the political state that prevents them from doing their job as well as they'd like.
Right.
So we're all, I think you said, very cognizant of the difficulty sometimes these people work under and are dedicated enough to stay.
And it is their home. And
That's right.
It's the home that they've chosen to raise their children. I look at a fellow like Sonny Van Skyhawk of the city and the city water department. As he said, I don't want anything to happen to my water. I live here. My kids live here. They drink this water. You know, so we have a tendency sometimes to forget that, I think. And bad publicity maybe follows people around when it shouldn't. And sometimes it follows them around a little bit longer than it should. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a minute with Gloria Rains. If you are suffering from headaches, lower back pain, numbness in the hands, neck, or shoulder pain, perhaps you should consult with a chiropractic physician. From the time you enter the offices of Dr. Robert W. Bruce, you are greeted and assisted by a staff of dedicated, knowledgeable, caring, and competent health professionals. Dr. Robert W. Bruce spends the time that is vitally necessary to examine and discover your area of pain and takes extreme care to help resolve your problem. So when a chiropractic physician is needed, call the Bruce Chiropractic Clinic. As Dr. Bruce says, the 5 most dangerous words in the world are, maybe it will go away. The Bruce Chiropractic Clinic, located at 4232 26th Street, West Bradenton, or call 753-3949, the Bruce Chiropractic Clinic.
Alex Karras Lincoln Mercury is overstocked from new car trade-ins, so we're having a used car blowout sale. Take advantage of specials like this 86 Ford Escort, only $59.95, or this 86 Buick Century, only $79.95, this 85 Continental, only $10,995, this 87 Cadillac, only $14,495, or this 87 Grand Marquis, only $11,995. If you want the finest used cars available at the lowest prices, visit Alex Karras Lincoln Mercury, 2 miles north of the Sarasota-Bradenton Airport on US 41.
Welcome back to Manatee Open Live with my guest Gloria Rains, Minnesota 88. We're running out of time because we're going to show the documentary a little while on recycling. And again, a lot of people called and said, well, we were disappointed. We didn't know you were running that last night. So we're kind of proud of the fact that it came out as well as it did. And it is very interesting. I think it teaches us a lot about recycling and why the reasons for it. A couple of other things I want to talk to you about, one of which is water quality, and the second is storm water management. Do you feel as though we're doing enough? I know that the county is working very hard in stormwater management, especially to try to do as much as they can at this point, but what's the future look like?
In developed areas, I think it's going to be very difficult to improve stormwater much because there's not enough space to properly let it run off and drain out some of the pollutants. I'm watching stormwater management programs with a jaundiced eye. It's going to be extremely expensive in developed areas, and I want to be sure we're getting what we're paying for. And I think the county plan as it is now appears to me to be more of a drainage plan than it is a treatment plan. We'll see how it comes along, but I think everyone has to watch that because retention ponds are only as good as the treatment they get to keep them operating, and you have to have large areas to have them. And in urban areas, that's going to be hard to find.
What about water quality? It seems to me that everyone's, really working desperately to try to maintain a good quality of water. And I know that we had a documentary we did for the county about the Floridan aquifer and the watershed and so forth. And we're acquiring more lands now to try to maintain an equalization of the amount of waters that we'll have in the future. Do you feel good about that?
If you can fight off the propensity of the park and recreation people to plan every inch of the watershed with some sort of thing that will pollute it, fine. I think that again, the people in Manatee County that drink county water have to realize our water quality is not going to be as good as it was because we're going to be using groundwater that requires more treatment. And then you have some things in there that have to be removed, and it takes, as I say, more treatment, and it's more expensive. We've had probably the best water quality we're ever going to see in this county, as far as the county water supply is concerned. And I think we have to do more to preserve Lake Evers and Lake Manatee as far as any development's concerned, or any urge to, as I say, put some of these facilities in there that don't belong there.
And we'll hope that technology comes along too to help us try to improve our quality of the water as it comes along. Overall, the planet. I know I talked to Jane. She says the planet's destroyed. You can't replace the ozone. You can't do this. You can't do that. Do we have a chance to save our planet? I mean, if you look at the world situation, we can see that we pretty much decided let's not destroy it with atomic weapons. We can probably find some way to get together and to find other things to do besides kill each other with bombs and atomic weapons and so forth. Do you think there's a chance that we can save this planet?
Oh, I certainly do. I think that we have a limited time that we can do it. But I think when you see the Russians and Americans standing side by side and the two Germanys reunited, that anything can happen. And I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel that there was hope. And I just think that it's going to take people overruling their governments in this case, or electing people who really have some knowledge and care about their constituents and the future of the world rather than their own future and self-aggrandizement, which unfortunately we have too much of.
We appreciate you being with us tonight, Gloria, and as always, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and you know, it's always enlightening for me when you're here. And I wanted to get you on pretty quickly because I know that you were quite concerned about, especially about the pollution control, as evidenced by your show Monday, which I enjoyed, by the way. And maybe the input of us and the other folks who are watching here tonight will be able to put some pressure on our elected officials to maybe think a little bit more about what they're planning on doing here.
I hope so, Dan.
So do I. And we'll see you Monday night. No, you won't be hosting your show Monday night. You'll be showing the tape, but we'll see you the week after.
Right.
And Gloria, of course, is on every Monday here on Manatee 43 at 8 o'clock for Minnesota 88. Tomorrow night, my guest will be get a couple of folks who lost in the recent election. I wanted to bring in some others too, but everybody's out of town. I think they're all trying to take a vacation after going through a very difficult campaign. But tomorrow night we will have with us Linda Barrett O'Neill, who was unsuccessful in running for the District 7 seat on the County Commission, and also Jim Kissick, who was unsuccessful running for the Airport Authority. And they'll be coming in, giving us a little bit of their impressions about running for public office here and what it's like to run for public office and not win. And both of those folks ran into some problems with some of the local media. On Monday, we'll have with us Karen Wyndham of Emergency Medical Services here in Manatee County, and that proves to be a good show. We'll be bringing in some videotapes and talking about the emergency medical systems here in Manatee County. As always, keep business in Manatee County, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Good night, everybody.